Hey everyone, and welcome to Sasquatch Theory. Today I have some more Bigfoot emails that I'd like to read off before the heat gets extremely brutal. The past few days it's been horrible out here. Anytime I've tried to get out in the woods, I just get covered in sea ticks. It doesn't take long and it's extremely annoying just because they get in your clothes, in your shoes, in your socks, and even if you change and shower, somehow you're still getting more sea ticks on you. So yeah, it's just that time of year and fall's getting ready to hit, so hopefully it kills off a lot of these bugs and we can get back at it. But yeah, let's get into these emails. Our first Bigfoot email is from Jerry. This encounter took place in Northern California. Alright guys, let's get into it. I have enjoyed watching some of your stories on YouTube. While my story probably won't qualify for a video as it is a secondhand story, but I thought you might find it interesting anyway. I live in Southern Oregon, about 60 miles from the California border. I have a good friend who lives here also. He is a native Happy Camp guy who was raised in Happy Camp. A couple years ago, he invited me to go on a 4th of July camping trip to Happy Camp. This is a local tradition for his friends and family that still live in Happy Camp. Being the oldest of the group at 63, I was accepted into their tight-knit group and was welcomed to go up every 4th of July. So this last trip, 2023, we went to a different spot to camp at a spot I cannot name. One member of the group, which I call Mike, works for the Forest Service as a surveyor, thus the need for a different name. Anyway, we have become good friends. I spent many years gold mining on the Yuba River and have given him a lot of insight on mining that I learned over the years. This guy, Mike, has spent more time in some of the most remote forests in the country, alone, than anyone I know. He hikes the backwoods working for a government agency, sometimes staying out for 2 to 5 days at a time. So last 4th, he was telling me about a mine shaft that was exposed after cleanup crews were cleaning up after the numerous fires that destroyed the area. That evening we took a hike to look at the shaft. It was very unusual as it was about 6 feet in diameter, 40 feet deep, with 20 feet of water inside of it. The unusual part is it was lined with mortar, much like a modern manhole would be. He talked to a local historian about it who came out to see it. He had heard of it but never saw it, and said at the bottom there is a horizontal tunnel going an unknown distance. I told him it sounded like a drift mine operation, even though the area had been hydraulically mined in the old days. We got to talking about unusual stuff you find in the wilderness, and he recounted a story about what had happened to him just a couple months earlier. He did say he could get fired just for talking about it. He was up very high on a mountaintop and had set up his very primitive camp. He is very minimalistic and never carries a weapon. His face turned white as a ghost as he elaborated on what happened that next evening. It was about 6 p.m. and he was cooking over an open fire. He said he heard some crashing sounds less than 100 yards from his camp. Next he heard these deep whooping sounds coming from the same direction. He said it was so loud he could feel it in his chest. This guy has spent his life in the wilderness and had never heard anything like it. He was terrified just talking about it. He said it continued for over an hour and described it as nothing natural. He said he never slept that night and didn't even have a tent. He just kept the fire going and waited till first light so he could get out. I could see that it really bothered him. He told me he went back there twice, scouted the area looking for tracks, but never found anything. This area is badly damaged with snags everywhere. He even waited till the same time of the evening to see if he could hear it again, but didn't spend the night. He told me he had not told anybody because of the ramifications if he did, but I was an outsider, so he confided in me. I told him what we had been describing has been heard by a lot of people, and there are lots of videos out there about it. He has never watched YouTube and doesn't have a TV or a computer. I told him it sounds like a Bigfoot encounter, and he said he doesn't believe in any of that stuff. I told him you should watch some of the videos because what you're describing sounds exactly like many other people's encounters. Anyways, interesting story because I wonder how someone could spend their life in that wilderness and never see or hear anything. I guess it just took 30 years and being in the wrong place at the right time. Yeah, I agree. Thank you very much, Jerry, for sharing that encounter that your friend had. Yeah, it sounds like your friend ran into a clan of Sasquatch, and they'll do that. They'll come in stomping and whooping, and typically you won't see them. But I think that's what he ran into, and I appreciate you for taking the time to share what you heard. All right, let's move on to our next Bigfoot email, and this one is titled Hot Springs National Park, Arkansas. My experience happened in Hot Springs National Park, Arkansas, on top of Mount Riante, Riante. I was 15 and it was early September 1981. I was with 2 male cousins and 2 friends. It was around 2 p.m. I needed to use the bathroom. The mountain was a clearing with a radio tower. My oldest cousin Timmy was 19. He got a flashlight out of the glove box of the truck and we headed down a trail that was more of a game trail at that time. Timmy told me there was an abandoned park ranger cabin a little bit into the woods and maybe there was an outhouse or just a place for me to pee. You're out in the wilderness, can't you just find a place? Just about that time we got far enough past the wood line into the woods where we couldn't see the clearing. A wall of smell overcame us. I could smell it, taste it, and almost feel it. It was enough to trigger what I know now is fight or flight. It was a skunky death smell. I think I described it like that because at the time in my life a skunk was probably the worst thing I have ever smelled. That's just how I described it at the time because a skunk is the only thing I could think of that smelled that bad other than death. Honestly, I thought we were fixing to see dead bodies in that cabin. Timmy was in front of me and he shined the flashlight in front of us and I could see the cabin almost right in front of us. By the time I had taken the 2 extra steps to catch up to him, he had turned to our left. I walked up to his shoulder and said, "Timmy, what is that smell?" I immediately looked where he was shining the flashlight and what I saw was so close to us, it was still in the beam of the light. Its arm was up, but straight out. I could see the bottom of its bicep, the armpit, enough of the chest to know it was male, down the side of its waist, the outside of its hip, and the very top of the thigh. It immediately screamed and hollered at us with more lung strength than a human can put out. I felt it as much as I heard it. It was maybe 3 yards away, seriously, maybe that far. It was at least 7 to 7.5 feet tall. I only know that because I'm 5'9", and I was that tall then. I could have easily walked under its arm, and he told me it was a wild man, Polly. That's all it was. I said back, "But Timmy, he didn't have any clothes on." There is more. We made it to my aunt and uncle's house. They called somebody. They didn't talk to me, but I heard some of what my cousin told them. If you would like to talk to me, email me back. I currently live in a little fishing village outside of Puerto Vallarta, Jalisco, in Mexico. I do have a Mexican phone number, but I don't always have signal in my village. All right, Timmy, thank you very much for sharing your encounter, and that really means a lot to me. You definitely made a big change from leaving the Ozarks and going into Mexico. but I hear they have them too if you go into like Monterey or the mountain areas. They have like a different type of Sasquatch. But yeah, that was a very interesting story, and I appreciate you for taking the time to write that in. Alright guys, let's move on to the next Bigfoot email. This one was written in by Janet, and it's called Kansas City Sighting. My sighting happened here in Kansas City, Missouri, back in 2015. It was around the end of May. The Missouri River runs through this city. I was down by the river, I say about 2 miles, walking down a gravel road. I happened to be looking down at the ground while I was walking. I took a minute to look up. I watched this Bigfoot run across this road I was walking on. At first, I was just stunned. I thought, what the hell was that? At first, I thought it was just a person running across the road. But as I watched it cross the road, I thought again, it was moving pretty fast. The arms were long. I noticed that it was hairy, and it didn't have any shoes on its feet. It was at least 100 yards away, but I have good vision. Where it was running from was a wooded area, kind of on a slope. I don't think it noticed me. It was moving fast, going towards the river. I watched it push a few tree limbs out of its way. It pushed them to the side and just kept moving. I know what I saw. It wasn't human. The hair on its body was thick brown, black in color, and it was very tall. Still to this day, it seems like it just happened yesterday. I really didn't notice any smell. After about a week, I decided to go look at where it had crossed. I had to see if it at least left something behind, but it didn't. Of course, at that time, it was pretty dry out. It was really hot, and it was during the evening time. I really feel like they travel close to water, so they can get water and fish for food while they travel. Yes, there are also power lines close to the river as well, but I think that if they can swim, they will go by the water. Alright Janet, thank you very much for submitting in your encounter, and that's only a couple hours away from me. Yeah, before I move on to the next email, I just wanted to say I do agree. I do think they travel the waterways, and for the same reasons you said, the food, water, cover, and also the power lines. Seems like a lot of animals travel the waterways and the power line strips. But yeah, let's move on to our next and final Bigfoot email. Alright, let's move on to our next Bigfoot email. This one was by Danny, and the title is Southeast Missouri Encounters 1960s through 1980s. Our family's traditional squirrel and deer hunting camps were always a tight circle of family and a few lifelong friends. Carl, the eldest, was a civilian, Conservation Corps, and World War II veteran. My Uncle Jimmy Lee farmed our family farm here in Pemiscot County. My dad, Buddy, was a post-Korean War veteran and avid hunter and fisherman. My cousins Rich and David, along with myself, were the youngest of the crew. Occasionally, my dad's friends Narvel and Doyle, who were Korean War veterans, joined us. In 1968, Dad, Narvel, and Doyle traveled up to Ripley County, Missouri for a combination squirrel hunt and deer camp scouting for the weekend. They arrived to a suitable place to make camp at dusk. They had a quick dinner and bedded down for the night. Dad and Narvel slept in the camp shell bunks in the truck. The weather was clear and not too cool, so Doyle slept on a cot outside. They hadn't built a fire nor unpacked the lanterns. Their flashlight and shotguns were ready, available should they need it. With their years of military service and hunting trips, they had no apprehension of being disturbed during the moonlit night. They had all drifted off to sleep. Dad was awakened by the truck rocking and Narvel yelling, "Buddy, get the gun! He's got me!" Inside the camper, it was very dark. Dad couldn't see what was happening. For fear that Doyle was messing with Narvel and not sure of what was going on, he replied, "I've got the shotgun. Are you okay?" Narvel, only a few feet away, continued to call for help. Dad kicked out of his sleeping bag and reached through the darkness, only to grab onto wide, hairy shoulders. He began fighting this intruder. At that moment, the intruder changed its focus to Dad. As he delivered punch after punch, the intruder made no noise and continued to get a grip on Dad. When finally able to get his legs free of the sleeping bag, he started punching and kicking with all he had. The glass in the camper shell end gate door shattered. Maybe this distracted the unwanted guest. Dad got a firm double-legged kick/push to the chest of his assailant. He heard it hit the ground, never making an utterance of any kind. With adrenaline pumping, Dad exited the camper with his flashlight and his shotgun in hand. Nothing, no person, no animal on the ground. No visible tracks. Best of all, no one was injured, just shaken up, wondering what the heck just happened. Doyle advised that when the fight started, he hit the ground in a prone position, not knowing what was happening in the darkness and not wanting to get shot. Narvel had no idea of what could have happened. He was possibly near shock. His only recollection was that something was pulling him and his sleeping bag out of the truck. Our group had never camped on that road. It was a few miles from Buffalo Creek on a dead-end road. There was a large pasture across the gravel road to the east and very steep hills between the camp. The nearest road was to the west. The guys fired up a lantern, cigarettes, and drank sodas, trying to decipher what had just happened. Within a few hours, sunrise arrived. Not a minute too soon. Some years later, I asked my dad why they didn't leave the area immediately. He responded that whatever he had fought that night was hopefully long gone, and the three of them didn't want to risk moving as their camp was secured. Within a few weeks, deer season opened. We set up camp roughly 5 miles away, as the men of our camp had hunted in this area previously. Fast forward 4 years, our annual deer campsite was at the edge of a clear cut where logging had been done a few years before. Dad and I weren't seeing any deer where we typically hunted. Most of the guys drove away from camp to hunt. We decided to scout some ridge lines across a road from our previous area. There was plenty of deer sign. Dad chose an area and I went deeper down the draw to give ample safety and space. After a morning hunt, Dad asked, "Why were you making so much noise?" I asked what exactly he meant. He advised that he could hear limbs breaking and possibly rocks being thrown. "It wasn't me," I said. These noises happened almost every morning as we were making our walk to our stands. At the campfire one night, the usual stories started to circulate. Most of the older guys had some strange occurrences to share. Dad recounted the story of the late night encounter just a few miles away and began explaining in detail what he and I had been hearing. The temperature was in the 20s and the wind was really blowing. Myself and all those listed above were all huddled around that fire, hanging on every word of each tale. Coyotes were really vocal to the north where we hunted. With the north wind, it was hard to gauge how far they really were. Carl started telling of his work with the Civilian Conservation Corps in the 1930s. He knew every road and valley in the area. His primary job for the work camp was to harvest fresh meat to feed the men. He started his account of getting lost on one such hunt. He knew nightfall was nearing, so he prepared for a night in unknown territory. With his huge campfire, he could see the nocturnal creatures coming to check him out. Also, the fire would help his crew find him. At that moment, an enormous growl/scream/howl came from the fringes of our area. I haven't a clue of the distance. It was so loud and so close. The coyotes immediately shut down. Everyone at the fire either picked up their rifles or went to the trailers to get them. Carl never flinched. He only said that he used to think that was a big cat, but after his night in the woods so many years ago, he learned there are things in those woods that some are not ready to encounter and never will be. These encounters kept up until around the mid-1980s. Deer and squirrel harvest was sparse. Prior to establishing our campsite, their squirrels had been plentiful and animal trails / deer sign was easily found. When we came in, something changed. Thanks, Miguel, for taking the time for this portion of my account. I will forward more if you find them interesting. As mentioned previously, my son and I hope to visit the area again in the fall. All my best to you, Dan. Dan, thank you very much for sharing your encounter. And yeah, if you have more, certainly send it in to me, because I would love to hear about it. And this is in my state, so I want to know more about it. I've never heard of the counties you mentioned, and there's certainly a lot of counties in Missouri, so that's the only reason why I haven't heard of it. I stick to my general region, but yeah, that is frightening that they came up to the campsite and tried dragging you guys out. I don't think they were just playing around. I think they were trying to get you guys. I mean, why would they risk getting hurt to drag you guys out of the camper if it wasn't to eat you guys or something? I mean, that's the only thing I can honestly think of, because if anyone ever dragged me out of my tent, I'm opening fire. So I don't feel like their intentions were very good, but I am glad that you guys got out of the situation. And yeah, I was wondering the same thing, why you guys didn't leave, but I guess when you have a big camp like that, it's kind of hard just to abandon all your stuff when you're already in a secured position. But yeah, if they weren't trying to get you guys, they were certainly trying to scare you guys out of the area. And yeah, it doesn't matter if you go just a couple miles away from a spot. Generally, they're going to be in the location somewhere around. So it doesn't surprise me that you guys are sitting around talking about these same stories in the same general area, and you heard vocalizations. It seems like they know when people are talking about them. I know that sounds stupid, but I've done that before, wondered why I haven't heard a wood knock or whatever, and all of a sudden, bam, you hear a wood knock. So it does seem like they know your thoughts, which is scary to think about. And again, it points towards the paranormal. But yeah, guys, that's the 4 emails for today, and I hope you guys really enjoyed the stories. I apologize for my slow reading capabilities. It started getting really hot out here. I'm not sure exactly how hot it is, but it's very hot. It's 11:11. Let's see. Yeah, it's got to be in the 90s. But anyways, if you have a Bigfoot encounter that you would like to share on the channel, please contact me at sasquatchtheory@outlook.com, and I would really enjoy listening to your encounters and experiences. And it doesn't have to be Bigfoot. It can be Dogman, Mothman. If you encountered a cryptid creature, I'm willing to listen to you and log it down on the channel. But yeah, I really want to get out there and camp, but I'm not going to camp in this weather. When the weather gets this bad, it's time to abandon the woods and head to the river or a lake. But yeah, thank you guys very much for listening to Sasquatch Theory and taking the time to listen to these people's real encounters. So thank you guys very much. Hope you guys have a good day. Stay inside, stay cool, be safe. Until the next one, everyone.